Hello, welcome. I've been spending the last month bringing you episodes that are a behind the scenes look at how, things that I've been learning as I run Sunlight Tax. And I'm curious what you think of these because I don't always know if you, the listener of this podcast, are interested strictly in tax stuff, or if you want a little bit of a rounder version of the things that make your creative or care-based business operational. I know as a person who has started a business and grown a business, am always really, really interested in listening to other people who've had a similar path to me, listening how they've overcome challenges. To me, I find that absolutely fascinating. And so I guess it's my hope putting out these episodes for you that you feel the same, but maybe you don't. Maybe you come to this podcast because you just want to know about taxes, and that's completely fine. But I'm definitely interested to hear. So if you have any thoughts about this, definitely send me a DM on Instagram. I would really love to hear from you about what kind of episodes you find valuable, and if you are finding value in this behind the scenes series. So my Instagram is @sunlighttax, and please tell me what you think. Do you like these episodes, or do you prefer just tax? I'm asking because I was looking at my downloads, and right after tax season, my downloads just dropped like in half. And so part of me was like, oh, geez, is this like people just coming to Sunlight Tax for taxes and then you feel done? Is there value I can provide to you for the rest of the year? Certainly my hope is yes. If you're listening right now, you're probably one of the people who did not stop listening because you got your taxes in. So you might be biased towards liking these episodes. But if I hear from you, it will tend to help me. You'll be the one who's determining the direction of this show. So let me know. Let me know what you think. Okay. So today I do have another, what I think is very juicy episode about why artists in particular, but also creative and mission-driven businesses make such natural entrepreneurs. And this is counterintuitive, right? Because a lot of us were taught that we're not good at business, not good at the stuff that makes a good business person. And I am here with a controversial but deeply experienced perspective of the absolute opposite. I think you are well positioned to be an amazing business person, and I'm going to talk about why. All right. So I find this topic really exciting. In fact, when I feel depressed about the world, the thing that gives me the most hope and gives me the feeling of excitement is the idea of people who really give a shit forming businesses that reflect their values and that put forward their vision of a better world into the world, right? Creative people, caring people like you, actually creating a business to solve a problem. This is how you can make a meaningful contribution towards making the world the better place that you want to see. So there's nothing more exciting to me than the idea of people who listen to this podcast forming businesses. And I hope you've gotten the vibe that that is very much what I'm trying to help you do. So let me give you, this episode is a little bit less about behind the scenes in the nitty-gritty sense, although please listen to the past 3 episodes, which definitely gave you a lot of that. I've done an episode on how to focus, how I structure my day to get more focus in my work. Career advice from my first and best coach, my own father, who is an architect of over 50 years, who has given me some of the most strategic career advice I have ever experienced. And he's definitely where I get my sense of strategy. And I can't remember the other episode. I'm blanking out, but there was another one too. All right. So let's jump into why artists, creative people, mission-driven people, people who really care about something in the world, why you make natural entrepreneurs, why you are so well positioned to actually not just make a functional business, but make an incredibly valuable and productive business. Okay. And just a little programming note, I'm going to refer to artists a fair amount in this conversation. But what I want to tell you is, because a lot of you who listen are artists, but there's actually a good amount of you listening who are not artists and may not even identify at all with artists. So a lot of you who are listening are in sort of arts adjacent or creative fields. You might be a copywriter, you might be a web designer, you might be an architect, you might be a dancer, sculptor, something like that. And some of you who are newer to the podcast are not even creative or creative identified at all, right? Some of you are coming here because you have that sense of mission, of money not being your North Star in everything you do, but actually your mission being the thing that is driving your work. And you need to know how to deal with the tax and money side of your business in order to make that business thrive, right? So if you are one of those care-based, mission-driven people, or a creative person who doesn't necessarily identify as an artist, I want you to listen to this episode too, because you will see yourself. Though artists are the nth degree of what I'm talking about, you in the creative fields and the mission-driven fields are also you have a lot of these same qualities, maybe not to the extreme that a lot of artists do, but you still probably, my sense is, will identify with a lot of this stuff, whether it's being taught that you're not good with numbers, maybe having a little bit of a phobia around money, business, and numbers, because maybe you grew up female identified and the world taught you that this wasn't your place. Or because you have a creative vision, or you feel sort of like more ethically driven than financially driven, right? So these might be factors that will make you very similar to an artist, where an artist might be taking that to more of an extreme, right? Really sacrificing income, really rejecting the way that the culture tries to position them all together, right? So this episode is really sort of meant to be inclusive, but I just want to explain that I am coming from the perspective of an actual visual artist who started a business and who has experienced a lot of success. Now, don't get me wrong, hard work, lots of hard work. And entrepreneurship is not for everyone. It is in some ways one of the most painful and difficult things I have ever done. But on the flip side, I have found entrepreneurship to be more zen than anything I've ever done. It makes me really have to look at information and remove my ego. It has made me have to learn how to be a better person, how to handle criticism, how to do things that are actually good for me as a human, and I feel really proud of working on. I never thought entrepreneurship would do these things for me. And I have found myself so surprised in a very positive way about how wonderful entrepreneurship has been for me as a human being, not just as a person with, a bank account and a family I want to support. So let's get into it. I want to talk about what makes artists, and remember, I want you to see yourself in this if you're a creative person, mission-driven person, but what makes artists naturally positioned to do well in business, to be amazing entrepreneurs. Okay, well, first of all, I want to get to the why. Now, this is really like in this whole behind the scenes series that I've been doing, I've been giving you sort of practical tips and practical observations about my own business and how I've made it thrive, and helping you hopefully to use some of those things in your business. But I want to just remind us all for a second before we dive in, why? Why do we care? Why do we do this? To me, I think that creative people, mission-driven people, you are making the world a better place with your work. And in fact, the very fact that you care about your quality of work and about the mission that you have, primarily, first and foremost, before you care about money, that is the very reason that I want you to be the one to thrive. That is the reason that you are who I gear all of my education towards, because I see people like us, creative people, mission-driven people, often have a very toxic attitude towards money and a scarcity mindset that actually hobbles the work that I wish you were able to do more of and more powerfully and with a broader reach and a wider audience, right? And handling the business technicalities and getting comfortable with the money side of what you are doing enables your vision to flourish and grow and get deeper and broader and impact more people in the world. In other words, I think it actually helps your mission go further. So I just want to kind of like set the stage right there, because, why would you bother starting a business? Obviously, to send your kids to college and pay your mortgage. Those are good reasons. But even more important, I think forming a business, we live in a capitalist society, and you can be anti-capitalist. That is fine. I understand. I was too at a certain point, but working within the system and trying to change it from the inside and trying to be an ethical business that reflects the values and vision you have in the world and actually perpetuates a vision you have, to me, this is a very productive way to change the world. Right? You can fight the power, and it's good that there are people who are fighting the power. And I spent all of my 20s fighting the power, and I still do. You will struggle to find somebody more civically and politically engaged than me. Of course there are, but I am very engaged, right? But I will say, using capitalism to make the world better is very productive, because our system is built around capitalism. It makes capitalism easy. And so if you can change the world from the inside of that system, you're just going to be more effective. You are going to get a lot more done. Okay. There's a role for people fighting the power, and I'm all for it. And please continue doing it. Right. I choose to do it at the same time that I operate a business that just reflects the personal and ethical values that I hold as a human being. And a mission drives forward a mission of empowering creative and values aligned people like yourself, right? Helping you have more money and a greater impact with your work. To me, that is my mission, right? Okay, setting the stage there. All right, so how are artists and creative people and mission-driven people, how are we so well positioned to be entrepreneurs? It's funny, right? Because a lot of times we think we're not. We think the opposite. And the world, like the artist stereotype, often tells us the very opposite. It says, oh, you're bad with business. You're bad with money. This stuff is not going to come naturally to you. We think you're flaky, right? This is not my actual experience in the world. As an artist, what I have seen in an almost 20-year art career is that artists are so hardworking, so resourceful. We are alchemists. We literally make valuable objects out of cast-offs and trash. What we do is incredible, right? So I think that putting those skills of resourcefulness and creativity into a business is actually a pretty natural fit. So let me make my case to you for how this is possible. Okay, so first of all, what I have noticed in my community, right, of mission-driven people, creative people, you're not scared of hard work. So entrepreneurship is hard, and it is especially hard in the beginning, right? When you're pushing the flywheel, building a business, you have to put in a lot before the system is built and before it can operate on its own and get some momentum to actually bring you in clients, bring you in work, bring you an audience that, then will kind of carry your work on the wind, right? So it takes a lot of upfront work and you don't get payment for it right away, it takes some time. And that is really scary, right? That is actually probably the number one deterrent to most people ever starting a business, is a huge amount of, frankly, unpaid labor right at the front. You're going to have to invest either time or money, right? One or the other. So, but I will say this. On the other hand, and this is not necessarily a wonderful thing about being a mission-driven person or a creative person, but a lot of times for us, we have an advantage because we are not being paid that well, because we are not being paid, frankly, what the value of your work is worth. You have a lower opportunity cost than other people who might start a business. So what is opportunity cost? In economics, opportunity cost is basically the cost of not doing the thing you would have done had you not done X, right? So if you start a business, but you have to quit a job working for a consulting firm where you make $180,000 starting salary out of Harvard Business School, right? For you to start a business is actually a really high opportunity cost, because what you are giving up to go eat ramen for 2 years and get that business going, you're giving up $180,000 salary, right? Most artists and kind of mission-driven people that I know, we're not giving up $180,000 salary. When I decided to start Sunlight Tax, I was not giving up a big salary. Not at all. Not at all. My opportunity cost was certainly a lot lower. And in fact, in my art career, I was pretty used to putting in really long hours and lots of work and using lots of strategy to get in the door, places that naturally want to say no to you. And I actually found that was really good practice, like hearing no a lot, having to be strategic in the way that I would get a chance to meet someone and make a first impression and show them how impressive my work was and how good my follow-up was. Those skills are so useful as a business. And when what you're used to is like a big fancy career with a massive salary where you have a big fancy name on your resume, whether it's a fancy degree, whether it's a fancy company that you work for, right? Like, that stuff is hard to give up to go eat ramen for a little while, on the chance of doing something better. But for me, when I was starting Sunlight Tax, I wasn't giving up that much because I didn't have a lot of money coming in. I didn't have anybody just saying yes to me reflexively because of, how much attention artists naturally command from the world, how much natural respect I got as an artist, right? So the opportunity cost was actually very low, okay? You probably don't realize that a lot of people who seem more qualified than you to start a business actually often have a harder time doing so because they're giving up more to do it. So I don't love that this is an advantage, but it is an advantage. Okay. Also, the fact that you're not scared of hard work, right? Like I said, in my creative career, I really had to be strategic in order to get meetings with curators, in order to get studio visits from people. I had to really strategize, like timing and persistence and follow-up and organizing my contacts so that I could, continuously follow up with the same key 20 people over and over. These skills translate beautifully into running a business. And I'm sure that if you have any kind of career in a world that is difficult, I am sure that you have honed some skills like that to navigate a world that is hard, where you hear a lot of no's, and that is another tremendous advantage. Another thing that I find, especially with artists, is that we're willing to take risks, right? I have a story to tell you. Because I have an enrolled agent's license, that is my tax license. I'm licensed by the IRS. My license requires me to do continuing education. So not only did I go to school for accounting and sat in rooms with accountants in that context, I every single year have to, Now it's mostly online, but I would often do in-person continuing education trainings where I'd be in rooms with accountants, right? Learning about, local sales tax laws or whatever it was, to keep my license. Well, what's so funny about that is over and over again, I would go to like career development sessions with other accountants where the things that were being taught were so inherently obvious to me. I could not believe people were paying money to sit in a room and learn this stuff. I'll give you an example. How to have a presence on Instagram, right? A lot of accountants really resist having any social media presence, right? And even if they do it, they're not necessarily doing it in a way that is very strategic or personable or, something that somebody might want to pay any attention to, right? And so there would be people in rooms trying to convince accountants the value of having an Instagram account and what you might possibly post on it. Now, I bet some of you are already laughing as you hear this because you're like, oh, that is so obvious to me why I would do that. And not only, even though I think I might have a lot of room for improvement, I am certainly further along the track than that. I definitely am using my Instagram account to get visibility and to connect with people, and I know how to make compelling content. So that's a major advantage that you have. But even more so, accounting is a naturally really conservative field, and that's a good thing, generally speaking. When you're dealing with finances, you want to be conservative, you want to be low risk. But a lot of times what I would see, whereas in the actual practice of doing the accounting work, staying conservative like that is actually very positive and good. But running your business, it's not so great to be that conservative. You actually can do a lot better in business when you're willing to take some risk. And what I find so funny is that a lot of business development stuff I have done with other accountants, the risk taking that accountants are willing to do in running their business is phenomenally low, right? So I would be in rooms where someone was trying to convince this group of accountants, for example, that they should switch from hourly billing to value-based pricing models. Those of you who are in like design work, agency work, you probably know about this shift, but if you don't know what I'm talking about here, there is a big shift in businesses towards value-based pricing your work to a client based around the value that client gets out of the work, as opposed to just hourly billing, right? Because with hourly billing, you can't scale very well. And the more expert you get in something, and the more quickly you are able to do that thing, the less you get paid. And that is sort of backwards, right? So value-based pricing helps to correct for that, that sort of problem that can come up. Okay, so I'm in a room filled with accountants in a session about value-based pricing, and there is so much resistance in that room. And to me, I'm thinking like, oh my God, I am making a shift from being a full-time artist, right? Which is completely risky. It's all the way risky. Like I'm not making much money at all ever. And I'm trying to start a business where there's a proven business model, right? Doing tax returns, everybody needs their taxes done. And I'm just trying to learn how to do it as well as I possibly can, right? I'm trying to apply the skills of being an artist to accounting where it's just easier. It's really easy to be an accountant. There's a lot of room for mediocre accountants in the world. The world just actually needs a lot of accounting. And artists, I think the world does need artists, absolutely, but it's not always willing to pay for them. And it's not a need in the sense of like every April 15th, you need a painting, right? Whereas every April 15th, you do need your taxes to be done. So in this room of accountants, there were all these people who it's like they were having a really hard time even making any changes at all to move from one pricing model that already worked, but that they were very familiar with, to this other pricing model that only had the potential to work better, right? That was the risk, right? A business that works to a business that works better. That's the risk, right? And to me as an artist, I was like, that is such a no-brainer. I can't, like, the resistance was confounding to me. I don't know an artist in the world who wouldn't take that risk, right? Artists have to change all the time, right? We have to adapt. We have to be sensitive to the culture. We have to sort of like navigate and negotiate. So I was like, oh, wow. It just it gave me some insight into how incredibly resourceful and open to change and open to risk creative people are. Okay. Another very related point about that is that creative people, generally speaking, have a more inherent sense or an inherent understanding of branding, right? Good branding is really about standing out, right? You want to differentiate yourself from your competition, right? So it's very important to, when you start a business, to be different from everybody else doing the same thing, right? Well, why would you come to Sunlight Tax versus go to H&R Block? So what's important to me is to show you, well, I'm very different from H&R Block, and here's how. And I'm in fact trying very hard not to look like other accountants, and I'm happy to be be all the things that I genuinely am, and show you how those are so different from the sort of like white, bro-ish, khaki wearing accountant that you might be used to, right? I'm going to be out here and be queer and artsy and weird, politically engaged, liberal leaning, unabashedly so. I'm going to be all those things, right? And you're getting a very specific flavor when you come to Sunlight Tax or listen to the Sunlight podcast versus listen to somebody at H&R Block, who's probably a lot more generic. So the funny thing to me is, like, in a lot of other parts of the world, especially very established professions, dentists, doctors, accountants, there's less of an obviousness about standing out, right? And accountants in particular, given that conservative orientation in the actual work that they do, they don't want to stand out. In fact, what they want to do is look like every other accountant and do things the way other accountants do. They're very scared of doing something different or sticking out, right? There's an inherent conservatism to accounting that makes accountants really struggle with branding. So reflect on that for a minute. Whatever you are doing, you probably have, if you're listening to this podcast, you have a vision, you have a mission, you have weird little interests that you're pursuing, you have a niche, right? These are all things that create a strong brand, or that can be building blocks of a very, very strong brand, which is incredibly valuable and important when it comes to building a narrative and helping people understand what your business represents and why they should bother looking at your business versus somebody else's. Okay. So, and likewise, even more so, even more extreme is that artists and creative people are really pretty okay with swimming in the opposite direction of the culture, right? So artists in particular, I would say, have a big advantage here. A brand that is willing to really stand out is going to stand out. Standing out is good, right? I mean, it can be scary because you're going to catch flack when you stand out. And I think this is why people are scared of doing it. You'll hear from the people who don't like it. It is polarizing. So what happens is you'll get people who hate what you do, and it'll be personal sometimes. They will hate you, right? But you'll also have people who love what you do and who love you, right? And that's what you want, right? So, to me, it's obvious that Sunlight Tax is not for everyone, right? And I am okay with that. I do not need to be all things for all people. H&R Block exists for that. I don't need to be all things for all people. I want to be very specific for the person who needs to hear my voice, right? For the person who doesn't themselves feel seen and who knows that I will see them, okay? And I think as an artist, like, my inherent training as an artist is like, the more you can stand out, the better. And often artists know how to do this They might not have words for it all the time, but often artists will even know how to do this in a sort of branding sense. We don't call it branding as artists, but we might call it visibility, right? So you'll go to an art opening and you will always, if you go to art fairs, you will always see some artists like trying to have a look, cultivating a look, right? And it's nothing to do with their art, but it is trying to sort of cultivate a persona a little bit, a sort of public facing profile, right? That's the person who always wears a black handkerchief around her neck. That's something I started doing during COVID, but I like it. Or, that's the person who, I'm trying to think, like Fran Lebowitz, right? She's got a look, right? She's got those cuffed jeans and boots. She always looks great, right? And she's got this really timeless kind of style. She just looks sort of like Fran Lebowitz. All right. You're also really, really good. Generally speaking, creative people are good at ideas. Now, not everybody is good at ideas in the same way. I know a lot of artists who are not really idea artists, like they'll kind of like have one big idea and they work on that for 20 years. Whereas some artists and creative people are very generative and just like have an idea a minute, right? Like I'm thinking about Robin Williams here for a second, like to hear him speak. He almost seemed disordered at times with like how much he could switch contexts and like put on 10 different voices in one monologue, maybe more, maybe 50, right? But he kind of embodies in a physical form the way that a lot of creative people operate, like idea, right? So having big ideas, new ideas, creative ideas, it can get you in trouble. Pursuing every idea is not fruitful. You have to be able to sort the good ones from the bad ones or pursue the one, let go of ideas that aren't working quickly. But of course, having a big idea, that is awesome. That is an element of most founders of successful businesses. All right. And then related to that, another advantage that I see artists having when it comes to forming successful businesses or becoming entrepreneurs is a sense of cultural observation, right? This could be true if you are a mission-driven person or a creative person in another field as well. But being sort of on the bleeding edge of what is happening in the culture, this is a skill that we cultivate, right? When you're an artist, you are trying to be super attuned to trends and events, things that you see out in the culture. Avant-garde is a term applied. It comes from the military, right? It's about the scouting, the scouts in a war who would go out before the front and see what was happening. But that's what it means to be avant-garde. You're out in front. You're out in front of the first line, right? So when you have that sense of being avant-garde, of being ahead of the curve, that's a really valuable skill when it comes to entrepreneurship, both for generating ideas about products or services that will work or things that people need, concerns that people have, ways to address those concerns. These are incredibly valuable skills. And I will give you a really tangible example in my business of how this has operated. So I really, as I do as an artist, in my art side of my life, I will listen to lots of podcasts with other artists. I read a lot of arts blogs. I talk to a lot of artists. I show up at events, openings, and I physically in person talk to other artists. And so I try to have a sense. And of course, I go to art fairs. And so through those means, I'm trying to have a sense of what is going on culturally in the art world, what the concerns are, what people are talking about. Well, I do the same thing in business. It's kind of natural for me because this is how I always operated as an artist. But in business, I do the same. I listen to podcasts every morning. So I'm constantly listening to podcasts from business people. I listen to economic podcasts. I always want to know what's going on in macroeconomics, like with the Fed and interest rates, with the local economy, with the national economy, the global economy. And so also, as a person who has an online business, it's really important for me to stay on top of, audience behavior. How are people behaving online? Are people leaving Instagram? Like, Instagram is a constant source of conversation for a lot of online business owners because it's a source of visibility that you can't get through other means, but it's also clearly creating mental health challenges for everybody. And had some real downsides, right? So I'm constantly trying to, observe, like, how are people behaving on Instagram? Are they shifting the way that they used to behave a year ago, 2 years ago? Is that becoming something different? Are people now listening to podcasts more? How do you distinguish yourself as a podcaster in a world where everybody's starting a podcast, right? So staying on top of trends and making observations, this has continued to serve me over and over. I don't consider myself any kind of expert on it, but I certainly have this habit of inputting information every single day and really trying to stay ahead of kind of where the culture is and innovate wherever I can in response to what I see. The other thing that this is a little bit more of a personal side about the advantage of starting a business as a creative person. But to me, something that happened in my long 20-year art career is that I felt no correlation between the amount of work I put in to a given show, for example, and the amount of money that came out. Now, this is not something you are going to relate to if you are working a job, right? Because hours in equals money out in that situation. But as an artist, where I was completely on my own, just painting shows, selling my work, I would find that I might make a really innovative new body of work, and I might work really, really hard to develop that work, and it might get to my show and not sell. And at times I might show older work that was more popular, more proven, and it might sell pretty well. Right. And so I had this weird experience as an artist, and that work that would sell really well might have been work I'd already made. So I barely had to put any effort into having that particular show. Right. So I actually had this very odd experience myself as an artist. This is kind of personal, but where the money that I earned from my work had no correlation with how hard I worked on it. And this is really kind of bizarre, and probably most of you will not relate to this, but I have to say that the level of strategy and attention and care I always put into my art and my art career, I always found it pretty tough and demoralizing how little money I would make from it, or how random it seemed when I did make money from it, right? Like, I might get a random phone call that somebody had stumbled into my gallery and bought a piece, right? And I hadn't put in any effort at that moment. Of course, years ago when I made that piece, I did, but it didn't correspond in real time. I found that really demoralizing. It actually made me feel really out of power. And it sapped at my feeling of agency. And I did not like that in my art career. And I have to say that personally, as an entrepreneur, even with a really baby business, and I will be honest with you, that my first year in business in Sunlight Tax, I made $5,000, and that was for a year of full-time work. So not everybody can afford to, jump in full-time when you're making that little money. But I will say I was willing and able to put in the strategy, the upfront work, the due diligence, the follow through, the effort, the pitching, the sort of difficult work to establish a baseline for a business that is now certainly generating enough to pay a mortgage, save for my children's college fund, and give me a nice, healthy retirement fund, right? So I feel super excited with the level I have been able to grow my business to through these skills. But it is important to understand it didn't start in a place that was so juicy and wonderful. And I really paid my dues in the beginning for years and years of pretty low income and pretty intense levels of work. But I found it satisfying even from the beginning that I could see in my entrepreneurship that my effort paid off, right? Even if it didn't mean money yet, I could see my audience grow. Even if it didn't mean money yet, I could see myself booking more workshops where I teach about taxes. That is a way that a lot of people get to know me for the first time. And it doesn't mean I make money immediately. I mean, I'm paid as a speaker, but over time, those people generally start to come into my world and learn what I do and learn how I can help them, right? So eventually that will tend to pay off in the form of people who buy my program. So to me, using all my strategy and my skill and my hard work and having that actually seeing tangible results from that, that to me has been an incredibly satisfying piece of being an entrepreneur. And I will say this also, as an artist, I found it very difficult. I have always found it very difficult that it's hard to gauge where you're at. So much of your work and your career exists in your own head, and it's about how you frame it to yourself. Like you have to define success for yourself because it's not that obvious what a successful artist actually looks like. But in entrepreneurship, I have really made friends with numbers, and I find it absolutely delightful that in my business, there are metrics that I can track and I can physically see that I'm doing better than I used to be doing, right? I can see improvement. Sometimes that's a form of money in my bank account. I'm always happy with that one, but it can be audience growth. It can be that just, this web page, more people actually click on it than the old one. There are all kinds of different metrics that I can use to show me that my efforts are working. And basically, I find that super, super exciting and super gratifying. So that's just a little bit of insight personally into how, I have found great satisfaction in running this business. So I just want to remind you, I just want to kind of recap that I think that artists, creative people, mission-driven people like you are naturally positioned to become entrepreneurs. Not everybody is up for the hard work and the initial sacrifice of starting a business, but if you are, I just want to be a light in your life to say you absolutely can do it. And not only can you do it, you might be far better positioned to do it than other people in your life think. If you listen to the last podcast where I interviewed my dad, you will notice that there is a moment in that podcast where he says that he basically thought I was crazy when I told him I was going back to school for accounting and I had this vision to start this business. But here I sit from my podcast with my successful business, talking to you and telling you, you aren't crazy and you can absolutely do it if you decide you want to. All right. So I hope that has helped you, given you some of the courage of your convictions. If you need more of that, please DM me. I am here for you. I live to encourage new entrepreneurs, especially from historically marginalized groups and creative weirdos who want to make the world a better place. You are the business I want to thrive. So please let me know how I can help you. Send me a message on Instagram. I'm at Sunlight Tax. And let's all remember the vision, right? You can make the world a better place by starting a business where you embody the values that you want to see in the world and where the product or service in your business solves a problem that you want to solve in the world. To me, that's helping businesses like yours survive and thrive and have lots of money so you can have more power in the world. So Let me know if this has been useful for you. I would love your feedback. Again, I'm not sure if you prefer my episodes that are strictly about tax topics and money topics, or if you like these behind the scenes and entrepreneurial oriented episodes. So please let me know. Send me a DM at Sunlight Tax. I will be so happy to chat with you there. And for all of you, I made you a free resource that I am super excited about to help you get your head around some of these hard, confusing business things. I created a whole private podcast series. It's only 4 short episodes, but it is a special sort of the good stuff. It's 4 episodes that are solving some of the key complicated issues that might be hanging you up and holding you back in your business. So I created this podcast, this private podcast series to nudge you along and to help you kind of absorb some information that you might have resisted and get you through it really clearly and easily. There's one episode about how to pay yourself. There's one episode about how to make your bookkeeping simpler and why you don't need fancy, complicated, and expensive bookkeeping. There's an episode about how to save more money with less using tax-advantaged accounts. And then there's a final episode where I tie it all together and show you just how much money you can save when you get all these parts moving together in sync with each other. So when you sign up for the podcast, and yes, you have to sign up with your email. And part of the reason is that I designed this private podcast series so that you will get emails alongside, kind of nudging you to listen to them, nudging you to take action. And so you can get that really digestible podcast series at go.sunlighttax.com/podcast. So again, you will sign up. You will get 4 private podcast episodes immediately, and you will get emails that will help nudge you and encourage you to take the action that we're talking about in those super valuable episodes. So you'll get that at go.sunlighttax.com/podcast. And let me know what you think. It is a brand new offering. It is free. It is meant to be super, super valuable for you. And I just built it for those of you listeners who want to take a little bit of an extra step, right? And kind of get a deeper understanding in some key areas, because I think long form teaching, like I do in this podcast, is sort of where my superpowers lie. And so I wanted to give you the really, really good stuff. All right. So I hope you sign up for that. Go.sunlighttax.com/podcast. And remember, you are making the world a better place with your vision, with your work. And my mission, which I think is an important one, is to help you do that by helping you conquer the really, really hard stuff like taxes, business management, etc. So thanks so much for joining me today. It is such a pleasure to be with you. Let me know if this has been helpful for you. And if you started a business recently, or if you just want to tell me about your business, feel free to connect with me on Instagram at Sunlight Tax. I would love to hear it. It is the joy of what I do. All right. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.